This is the first part from the anime. The anime begins by introducing a high school girl named Yoshino Somei, who confronts her grandfather, Rinji Somei, about an article in a magazine. The article claims that Yoshino is rumored to be romantically involved with the grandson of the Miyama family and that they are soon to be married, even though Yoshino has never met the young man. It turns out that Rinji took the initiative to arrange a marriage between Yoshino and the grandson of the Miyama family, as their families have known each other for a long time. Rinji also mentions that the young man is handsome and strong, just like his grandfather when he was young. In short, Yoshino goes to Tokyo to meet her potential fiancé. She is stunned when she meets the head of the Miyama family, Gaku, who is still strikingly handsome and strong despite his age. Yoshino then asks about his grandson, Kirishima, who surprisingly appears behind her without she noticing. Kirishima then introduces himself and invites Yoshino to the pavilion, which is separate from the main house, where they will live together once they are engaged. Yoshino is shocked to learn that they will be living together, even though she hasn't decided whether or not she agrees to the engagement. Sensing her hesitation, Kirishima tells her that he doesn't mind if she refuses the engagement, as he understands that Yoshino was also forced into the arrangement. Kirishima had assumed that Yoshino would reject the engagement, but when he heard that she wanted to meet him, he was truly happy and grateful. In the days that follow, Yoshino arrives at her new school, Orin High School, one of the top schools in Tokyo, which also happens to be where Kirishima attends. After telling her grandfather that Kirishima is a good person, Rinji immediately arranged for Yoshino to transfer to Tokyo and enrolled her in the same school as Kirishima. Meanwhile, Kirishima is pleased that Yoshino decided to move to Tokyo, and he escorts her to her class. At that moment, Yoshino feels somewhat relieved, as Kirishima seems like a kind person, and he doesn't look like a yakuza at all. In class, Yoshino is approached by a few girls who ask about her relationship with Kirishima, as they saw her arrive at school with him. Before Yoshino can explain further, they glare at her and walk away. Later, when Kirishima calls her in the hallway, Yoshino notices that the girls look at him with admiration, and some even try to greet him. Yoshino comments that Kirishima is very popular at school, but Kirishima replies that they all know him as the grandson of a yakuza family, so it's only natural for them to act that way. Yoshino commented on whether people weren't afraid of the yakuza, but Kirishima explained that times had changed, and if the yakuza caused trouble, people could easily report them to the police. Yoshino then asked if Kirishima felt bothered by the way people looked at him. Unexpectedly, Kirishima's previously warm aura suddenly turned cold as he said that he never cared about what people thought of him and didn't mind at all. That night, Yoshino couldn't sleep, thinking about the conversation, so she decided to leave her room. At the same time, she saw Kirishima arriving home, his clothes covered in blood. Kirishima seemed to sense that Yoshino was watching him from afar and looked her way, but Yoshino quickly hid behind the wall. She suddenly felt weak, realizing that Kirishima truly was a yakuza. The next day, Yoshino asked Kirishima to accompany her to buy some daily necessities, and he agreed. As Yoshino walked to her class, she accidentally overheard some girls gossiping about her. Because of Yoshino's noticeable appearance, they even called her a prostitute who threw herself at the Miyama family to repay her debts. Yoshino was upset because she was being treated the same way as in Osaka. However, instead of confronting them, Yoshino chose to walk away. That night, while Yoshino was walking alone, she was approached by a group of thugs intending to harass her. They dragged Yoshino into a deserted alley, but soon after, Kirishima appeared and brutally beat the thugs without hesitation. Seeing this, Yoshino trembled in fear and begged him to stop. Kirishima stopped, but then warned the thugs never to touch Yoshino, whom he referred to as his woman, and told them to spread word about him in detail to their gang. Kirishima added that he didn't care if they wanted revenge because he wouldn't hesitate to kill them and their families. After issuing his ultimatum, Kirishima took Yoshino away from the scene. He then explained that in Osaka, Yoshino was never bothered by thugs because people there knew she was the granddaughter of Somei Rinji, the most powerful yakuza boss in the city. Not only that, Rinji had secretly assigned bodyguards to protect Yoshino without her knowing. Kirishima also warned Yoshino to be careful since she was now in Tokyo, which was not her grandfather's territory. As Kirishima took off his blood-stained sweater, Yoshino noticed the yakuza tattoo on his back, and it immediately terrified her. Kirishima tried to touch Yoshino's face, but Yoshino unconsciously pushed his hand away harshly, then immediately apologized for her reaction. Unexpectedly, Kirishima expressed his disappointment, saying that Yoshino was not the kind of woman he had imagined. It turned out Kirishima had expected Yoshino to be a proud woman who toyed with others and was hated by many women. He also implicitly showed a masochistic side to his personality, but felt let down because Yoshino turned out to be too ordinary for someone from the tough and influential Somei family. Furthermore, Kirishima went as far as to tell Yoshino to become a prostitute, saying that with her beauty and great figure, she would be useful for him in that way, as she was no longer of any use to him otherwise. Kirishima added that Yoshino should tell everything about him if she decided to return to Osaka, as he wanted to ignite a war between the two most powerful yakuza families in Japan. Hearing all this, Yoshino was shocked and collapsed to the ground, unable to believe that Kirishima was such a dangerous and cold-blooded man. The next day, Yoshino found her locker covered in filth, with all her belongings ruined. At first, Yoshino wanted to report the bullying to her grandfather, but she remembered Kirishima's words and chose to clean her things instead. Soon after, Yoshino received a phone call from Rinji, asking how she was doing. In that moment, Yoshino could only cry, unable to tell her grandfather everything that had happened. Sensing something was wrong, Rinji encouraged her to endure for 1 year. He told Yoshino to stay there for a year, even if she was bullied, intimidated, or shunned by everyone. Rinji also suggested that Yoshino make Kirishima fall madly in love with her, and then break his heart after a year as the most painful revenge. Hearing her grandfather's advice, Yoshino decided to rise up and face everything, determined not to lose to someone as annoying as Kirishima. 2 weeks later, Kirishima informed his men that Yoshino had disappeared since the incident, and he thought she might have returned to Osaka. But surprisingly, Yoshino appeared at school the next day and approached Kirishima. Even more shocking, Yoshino revealed that she had sold herself, as Kirishima had suggested. However, instead of becoming a prostitute, Yoshino had sold one of her kidneys for 4 million yen and handed the money to Kirishima. It turned out Yoshino had gone to Shikoku over the past 2 weeks to sell her kidney through a connection she had there. Before leaving, Yoshino firmly stated that she wouldn't be returning to Osaka. She also made it clear that she didn't care about a crazy masochist like Kirishima and warned him not to make her angry or he would face the consequences. Not only that, Yoshino also confronted the girls who had been bullying her, threatening to destroy their lives if they bothered her again. Hearing all this, Kirishima suddenly found himself captivated and falling in love with Yoshino, so much so that he grabbed her hand and asked her to marry him. In the following days, Yoshino tried to avoid Kirishima, who constantly followed her around, even at school. On top of that, Yoshino still had to endure the pain in her abdomen from the recent surgery, and Kirishima's presence only added to her stress. Just as Yoshino was about to enjoy her lunch, Kirishima suddenly appeared and revealed that he had secretly installed a GPS in the electronic dictionary he had given her. Not only that, Kirishima also informed Yoshino that his grandfather had summoned them to the main house later that evening because there was something important to discuss. However, when they arrived at the house, Gakko had to leave due to urgent matters, and they were instead greeted by his henchmen, Tachibana and Inamori. Without wasting time, Tachibana immediately explained the problem. Tachibana detailed that the daughter of the president of Akazaka Enterprises, Akazawa Shirori, had gone missing. Although many speculated that she had run away, there was also a possibility that she had been kidnapped. Kirishima then explained that Akazaka Enterprises was a subgroup of the Takusa clan, ranked 3rd, while the Miyama family ranked 1 level above them. Tachibana urged Yoshino to stay close to Kirishima at all times, as they were responsible for her safety while she was living in Tokyo. If Yoshino was uncomfortable being near Kirishima, she would be guarded around the clock by Inamori. Shortly after, Kirishima took Yoshino out for dinner at a restaurant, where Yoshino asked him what made him fall in love with her. Kirishima laughed at the question, but openly stated that he loved everything about Yoshino. At that moment, Yoshino was surprised by his answer, but then she realized that no man had ever openly expressed his feelings to her before. As a result, She couldn't compare Kirishima to anyone and wasn't sure if he was being serious or just playing with her. Kirishima then showed Yoshino a photo of Shirori and described her as the typical spoiled and arrogant daughter of a wealthy family. Because Kirishima seemed to be taking the situation lightly, Yoshino warned him that if Shirori had truly been kidnapped, it could happen to them as well. However, Kirishima didn't seem too concerned, as he then revealed that he wasn't Gaku's biological grandson, given that Gaku had never married or had children. Kirishima explained that Gaku was the elder brother of his grandfather, meaning Gaku was his granduncle. Before Kirishima could elaborate further on his past, he suddenly received a phone call informing him that a member of the Akazuka Enterprises Association had been found dead. The next day, Kirishima came to Yoshino's class to inform her that the deceased member was involved in underground gambling. It turned out that Shirori was also linked to this man and had been participating in underground gambling for some time. Kirishima typically didn't concern himself with matters outside of the Takusa clan's jurisdiction, which controlled only 70% of Tokyo, unlike the Somei family, who held absolute control over Osaka. That night, Yoshino left with Inamori because Kirishima had to attend a funeral. Inamori then revealed that he rarely had conversations with Kirishima, even though he had known him since he was in middle school. Upon hearing this, Yoshino asked about Kirishima's past, and Inamori responded by saying that, according to rumors, Kirishima had committed serious violence when he was in 5th grade. At that time, Kirishima had beaten up 20 of his classmates, leaving them with severe injuries and broken bones. The situation was so serious that Kirishima's father couldn't handle it and had to ask Gaku for help. Fortunately, Gaku managed to resolve everything and eventually brought Kirishima into his yakuza family. Seeing that Yoshino looked frightened by the story, Inamori reassured her, saying it was just a rumor and hadn't been proven true. As they stopped at a red light, Yoshino spotted Shirori and her friends entering a nightclub called NOX. Yoshino hurriedly informed Kirishima about this, but Kirishima explained that NOX was in the territory of the Kirigaya Group, the same group that also managed the Somei family. Kirishima planned to go there alone, but Yoshino thought it would cause trouble for the Miyama family, so she took the initiative to go as the granddaughter of the head of the Somei family. Meanwhile, Shirori was planning to flee abroad after her associate was found dead shortly after they were caught running scams and managing illegal gambling operations. Apparently, Shirori and her associate had swindled the Filipino mafia, causing a loss of 500 million yen. Soon after, Kirishima arrived at the nightclub and greeted Shirori, but she didn't recognize him, even though they had met at the funeral of a group leader some time ago. Kirishima had suspected that Shirori disappeared under orders from her father because the Filipino criminal syndicate was now targeting their lives. Kirishima then instructed Shirori and her father to come to Gaku's residence and resolve the issue before it created bigger problems for the main family. At the same time, Shiori's bodyguards arrived and pushed Yoshino to the floor. As a result, a fight broke out, but despite being alone, Kirishima managed to hold his ground against Shiori's bodyguards with his impressive fighting skills. Witnessing this, Yoshino realized that Kirishima indeed had the potential to kill someone, as he was extremely tough and seemed immune to pain. However, Yoshino resolved to become stronger herself, and she fought back, managing to knock down one of the men who tried to attack Kirishima. Meanwhile, Kirishima was shocked to see Yoshino bleeding and began beating the man, thinking he had hurt her. However, Yoshino explained that her nose was bleeding because she had hit the floor when she fell and told Kirishima to stop before he actually killed someone. Kirishima eventually listened to her, embracing Yoshino because he was exhausted from fighting them all by himself. The next day at school, Kirishima informed Yoshino that Akazuka Enterprises' president had been expelled from the group and Shirori had moved abroad. However, Yoshino couldn't help but wonder why Kirishima had more injuries than before. Kirishima explained that the previous night, he had received a light punishment for causing trouble in the Kirigaya Group's territory. In addition to that, Kirishima handed over 10 million yen, a reward for successfully locating Shirori. Yet, Yoshino firmly stated that she didn't need his money or his corneas. What she needed most was a new hairdryer, so she asked Kirishima to accompany her to buy one. As they were leaving school, Kirishima noticed a man watching them from a distance. Soon after, Kirishima was seen chatting with another girl, but instead of talking about her, he kept mentioning how much he loved Yoshino. Rather than feeling jealous, the girl pointed out that Yoshino probably hated Kirishima and advised him to stop pursuing her, suggesting Yoshino might already have someone she loves back in Osaka. Later that night, while Yoshino was half asleep, she felt someone enter her room and try to touch her. The next morning, Yoshino assumed it was Kirishima who had entered her room the previous night. So she thought about changing her lock and decided to hide a knife under her blanket for extra protection. The following night, Yoshino pretended to sleep and caught Kirishima sneaking into her room again. Kirishima simply sat there, which only frustrated Yoshino further, as she couldn't figure out what he was thinking. She considered grabbing the knife she had hidden, but instead, Kirishima began braiding her hair. Annoyed, Yoshino attempted to attack Kirishima with the knife, but he easily overpowered her. Despite this, Yoshino scolded Kirishima and lectured him about sneaking into her room without permission. Soon after, Yoshino asked why Kirishima had been sneaking in while she was asleep. Kirishima replied that he wanted to see her face when she wasn't angry, as Yoshino always looked at him with irritation. He added that he just wanted to look at her as much as he could because whenever Yoshino was awake, she would always scold him and tell him to leave. Yoshino then asked about the wound on his forehead, and Kirishima explained that he got it for breaking the curfew set by Tachibana. When Yoshino asked why he had broken curfew, Kirishima was reluctant to answer, but Yoshino noticed the clear hickey on the back of his neck and figured he had spent time with another woman. Although Yoshino had never dated anyone, she was familiar with such things because her grandfather was a playboy. Surprisingly, Yoshino didn't show any anger upon discovering that her fiancé had spent the night with another woman. Curious, Kirishima asked why she wasn't upset, and Yoshino replied that she wouldn't hesitate to kill the man she loved if she caught him cheating with another woman. But unfortunately for Kirishima, he wasn't the man she loved, so she didn't care if he spent time with other women, nor was she interested in killing him over it. Upon hearing that, Kirishima asked if Yoshino hated him because she was always trying to avoid him. Yoshino explained that she wasn't avoiding him out of hatred, but because she couldn't figure out what Kirishima was thinking. On one hand, Kirishima always refused to do things he wasn't interested in, but on the other, when he became passionate about something, he would truly commit to it with consistency. Kirishima was taken aback by her words, and he immediately embraced Yoshino, confessing his love for her. The next day, Yoshino received a package from her grandfather, which turned out to be a photo of her father. She told Kirishima that her father had lived a normal life and often argued with Rinji because he didn't want to be involved in yakuza affairs. Furthermore, Yoshino shared that her father had died in an accident before she was born, so she had no memories of him. At that moment, Kirishima wanted to know more about Yoshino's past, but held back and instead informed her that Rinji would be coming to Tokyo the day after tomorrow. In the following days, Rinji and the leaders of Japan's most influential yakuza families attended a meeting to discuss business and other matters. Kirishima seemed well informed about the meeting, but Yoshino had never heard of it, as her grandfather had never shared anything related to yakuza affairs with her. Soon after, Kirishima showed Yoshino an old photo of Gaku and Rinji when they were young, where Gaku looked strikingly similar to Kirishima in his youth. Kirishima explained that Gaku hated having his photo taken, and those were the only memories of his younger days. At that moment, Tachibana remarked that Gaku and Somei must have been close friends, as Somei had convinced his boss to take a photo with him despite Gaku's dislike for photographs. Besides Rinji, Gaku also seemed to have a close relationship with the head of the Ryuzetsu family, which was a subordinate of the Takusa clan. After the meeting, Rinji approached Gaku, who appeared sleepy, and handed him a bag of candy. Shortly after, the head of the Ryuzetsu family, Akime, arrived and invited Gaku to go home together. Meanwhile, another Yakuza boss seemed irritated at the sight of Rinji, but chose not to confront him. That night, Yoshino contacted her friend, Shoma Terayashi, asking him to find an old photo album in her room in Osaka and send it to her. Being a good friend, Shoma agreed to help Yoshino, especially since he was also Rinji's adopted son. The next day, Yoshino met with one of her grandfather's henchmen, Hote, who had acted as a father figure to her, having taken care of her since childhood. Hote, who loved Yoshino like his own daughter, then suggested that Yoshino invite Kirishima to Osaka to meet their extended family. Hote was clearly concerned, which is why he wanted to meet Kirishima in person to ensure whether he could trust him to take care of and protect Yoshino. Meanwhile, a man asked Inamori about the door to the basement that was always locked. Inamori explained that the basement was once used to isolate yakuza members who were addicted to drugs, helping them recover. But now, Kirishima used the room for unknown reasons, and he always made sure the door remained locked. Soon after that, Somei arrived, and Yoshino immediately took him shopping, buying him some new clothes. They later had lunch together, during which Somei, much like Hote, asked about Kirishima. Yoshino responded by saying that Kirishima was a crazy man, and she had no intention of marrying him. She added that she was just trying to endure living with him for 1 year, then dump him and return to Osaka, just as her grandfather had suggested. Upon hearing this, Somei told Yoshino about the relationship between Renji and the Himetarano clan, which held significant influence in the Kanto region. Due to their friendship, the yakuza families in Kanto, including the Miyama family, had become wary. According to rumors, these families pressured the Miyama family into arranging a marriage with the Somei family, hoping this union would reduce the Somei family's influence in Kanto. Hearing this, Yoshino suddenly realized the possibility of a rivalry between the Somei family and the Miyama family, and Somei didn't deny it either. When they arrived at the hotel, Yoshino confessed that she was fed up with Kirishima and even considered returning to Osaka with Somei right away. After telling Somei everything she knew about Kirishima, which wasn't much, Somei then offered to kill Kirishima if Yoshino wanted him to. However, Yoshino said she didn't really want to kill Kirishima, though she couldn't deny that he was a dangerous man. As Somei stepped outside to smoke, unexpectedly, Kirishima arrived and introduced himself to Somei. This is the end from the first part of the anime. Moral lesson from the story: if your grandpa sets you up with a yakuza, just remember, running to Tokyo might cost you a kidney. Also, if your fiancé installs a GPS in your dictionary, it's probably time for a new relationship and a new dictionary.